Christian, can you see that it's recording? It is recording.
No,
It is recording.
it is? Okay, I cannot see it.
Okay. If I
Oh
go
yeah,
to the,
I can see it. Sorry.
okay. So deep breath, everyone, and then we will start. Okay, we'll start this webinar. So welcome to this webinar, which is the second in a series of webinars that we are making, that we have made on the Horizon Europe proposal template. And this webinar was originally held on the 19th of May with over 100 participants. Unfortunately, it was not recorded for technical reasons. So what you're watching now is a studio remake with the same speakers, but without a live studio audience. So it's a series. The last webinar was held on the 27th of May on the implementation section, and all three webinars will be available on our web page. Now, just briefly, I will introduce myself and I'll let the other speakers introduce themselves. So my name is Kim Krüger, and I am the national contact point for the health program here at the Danish Agency for Higher Education and Science. Our office is sometimes called the Eurocenter. And before I ask my colleagues to introduce themselves, I would like to extend our welcome to Bénédicte Charbonnel from the EU Commission. Bénédicte, we're very happy to have you with us here in this webinar, and thanks for participating again. And I will ask you to present yourself when you take over for your own presentation, but maybe Nils and Christian would like to just say a few words about themselves.
Yeah. Yes. Hello. I am Christian Holstein. I'm responsible for the Cluster 4, the digital industry and space, both as an NCP and of course also as a delegate in the program committee. And yes, Nils.
Thank you very much, Christian. And my name is Nils Götke, and I'm responsible for Cluster 6, which is bioeconomy, natural resources, food, and agriculture.
Great. So I will introduce, or I'll just run you through the agenda. So we are aiming to get through or to go through all parts of the impact section of the proposal template. So we'll go through part 2.1, project pathways towards implementation, and we'll have two presentations today by Bénédicte Charbonnel. The first one on this section 2.1, subsection 2.1, and then another one on section 2.2. And we've also decided to have two discussions at least during this first part that should enable us to go a little deeper into these new concepts, or at least this new concept, expected outcomes. And then at the end, we'll also talk about the summary table, which is also a novelty in this section. So this is the overall agenda. We're just following the chronology of the impact section in the proposal template. So before I give the floor to Bénédicte, let's just make sure that we're all on the same page. So when you're writing a proposal for Horizon Europe, a template is made available to you. So it contains three parts, which corresponds to the three evaluation criteria in a Horizon Europe proposal. So that's excellence, then impact, and then the implementation of the actual project. So this webinar is then on the second part, the section, impact section. And this is the part where you need to convince evaluators that you will be delivering the impact that is expected for the given topic, the topic that you're applying for. So that impact can be scientific, societal, economic, etc. The impact section is divided into three subsections. We'll cover them all during this webinar. So 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3. what you have here on the left-hand side was the template that you download from the participant portal once you start writing your proposal. Now with this slide, I want to draw your attention to the fact that the impacts of your project, or the impacts that your project is supposed to contribute to, are defined in the work program at 2 levels. Now, if you don't know what a work program is, a work program is a catalog of research and innovation topics that you can apply for. So the expected impacts are defined, or the impacts are defined at 2 levels. They're defined at the destination level and at the topic level. So the work program, or work program, comprises a number of chapters. They're called destinations. So a destination refers to a specific political strategies or goals. Could be large-scale transformation of EU societies, such as transformations to our health systems or transportation systems, or the way in which we produce energy. And each destination, each chapter of the work program has a number of expected impacts listed in them. And each chapter contains a number of topics. And each one of these topics must also deliver on the expected impacts defined at the chapter level, at the destination level. And then you have, in addition to that, at the topic level, a number of expected outcomes that your project must also deliver on. We'll come back to these in just a second. You have an example on the right-hand side from the coming health program. So you can see the expected impacts listed at the destination level and the expected outcomes at the topic level. So what is important is to note that the expected impacts or outcomes that you must deliver on that it's not always mandatory to deliver on all of the expected impacts listed at the destination level or the expected outcomes listed at the topic level. This is something you have to read the text carefully, and you will see that in some cases you are asked to actually deliver on all of them, on some of them, or on several of them. In any case, remember that you're in a situation that you're competing with other proposals, and so you should always aim at delivering on as many impacts as possible, if it makes sense, if you can do so convincingly. Now, after this little intro, I would like to hand the floor to Benedict. And Benedict, maybe you could just start by presenting yourself, and then the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kim, and welcome to everybody in this session 2 of the Impact webinar. So my name is Bénédicte Charbonnel, and I'm working for the Directorate General for Research and Innovation of the European Commission in the service dealing with business processes. And I worked more specifically on the preparation of the proposal templates for Horizon Europe. And before that, I used to work in France in a laboratory of the CNRS. So I've been as well a bit in the other side of the process. So let me guide through this presentation on impact under Horizon Europe. And we can go to the next slide. Here you have the wording of the impact evaluation criterion. So this is what is requested from you when you're drafting your proposal, and this is against what your proposal will be evaluated by the independent experts in charge of the evaluation of proposals. So there is 2 sub-criteria, one focusing on the pathways to achieve expected outcome and impacts, and this is what we are going to address in this first part of the presentation. The second sub-criteria is more dealing with the measures to maximize expected outcomes and impacts, and this will be the second part of the webinar today. So let's go to the next slide, and let's enter into the topic of the project pathways towards impact. We can go to next slide. And something really important about Horizon Europe is that it is really an impact-driven program. For Horizon Europe, we are trying to focus more on the impact both of the program in itself, the overall impact Horizon program can have on the development of new knowledge, on the society, on the economy. And we try to reflect that at the level of the projects. It meant that at the overall level of the program, we have developed what we call the impact logic through the key impact pathways framework. It is a list of indicators we are going to monitor to really assess if the program is delivering on its scientific, societal, and economical objectives. And at the level of projects, at the level of the proposals you are submitted, at the level of the projects you will implement, we are going also to focus a bit more on impact and on how your projects will deliver concretely some of these impacts. So this is the notion of projects pathway to impact. We can go to the next slide. This is just a bit more context about impact under Horizon Europe. So this impact has been designed, and Kim already introduced to you the notion of destinations, which is these chapters of the work program where you will find a list of expected impacts. This is what has been done at the Commission level in cooperation, of course, with the member states to define what we will want to reach as impact under Horizon Europe. This has been defined. Now we're interested in the concrete implementation. How are we going to reach this impact in practice? And here come the work program, which is this catalog of different topics that are going to be launch and for which we are going to invite proposal and evaluate and select them. And at the level of the work program, we really have this list of expected impacts and outcomes that we want to reach. And at the level of the proposal application form, we will ask you to explain us how your proposal is targeting those impact and outcomes. At the level of the reporting, if your proposal is funded, there will be also some requirements linked to impact. And later on, as this is more on the Commission side, there will be an important effort for tracking the impact and evaluating the effects of the program as a whole. But this is not the topic of today. Today, we will really focus on the proposal application form and on the evaluation of proposals. So we can go to the next slide where you have a long list of definitions. I'm not going to enter in the details of everything, but what is important to know is that the European Union has big policy priorities that you probably are a bit familiar with. For example, the Green Deal. There are also some key strategic orientations that have been defined at a higher level. But what will really be interesting for us today is the two notions that you see in green on this slide. The notions of expected impacts and expected outcomes. On the basis of all these key and important EU policy priorities, a list of expected impacts have been identified in the work program at the level of the destination, meaning at the level of this chapter. And what are those expected impacts? There are a list of wider long-term effects on society, on the environment, on the economy, and on science that will be enabled by the outcomes of research and innovation investments. They are really something more on a long-term perspective. And we refer, when we talk about the expected impacts, about the specific contribution of a given project to the expected impacts listed in the work program. And those impacts, they generally occur sometime after the end of the project. The second important notion is the notion of expected outcomes. The outcomes are specified and listed at the level of the topic, meaning the specific topic for which you will be drafting your proposals. And those outcomes are the expected effects of the projects that are supported under a given topic. They generally occur over the medium term. And this may include the uptake, diffusion, deployment, or use of the project results by a direct target group. Those outcomes, they generally occur during or shortly after the end of the project. So we really have the outcomes at short, medium term and impacts at a wider long term. So these are the key notions for the impact on the Horizon Europe.
Mhm.
But we will go a bit more into details in the next slide.
Mhm.
So what will happen when you will submit your proposal? So first, of course, you need to identify the topic you're interested in. You need to select it. You need to read the text of the topic carefully. And then you will draft your proposal. So you will be addressing excellence. And this was the subject of another webinar. And then comes the second section of the proposal template, which is impact. And the first thing that is required from you is to describe the impact of your proposal through this notion of project pathway towards impact. You will be asked to think about the specific contribution of your project that can be made to these expected outcomes and impacts of the work program. Something that is really important to know and to remember is that you need to include only the outcomes and impacts where your project will make a significant and direct contribution. We don't really expect you to describe very tenuous small links to wider impact when it's not really concrete, it's not really anything tangible. There is no real link between what you are planning to do in your project and this expected impacts. If it's not significant and direct, that's not really what is required. We really require you to refer to the effects of your project, concrete effects of your project, and not to the research and innovation in general in this field. It means that we don't want you to say that research in the field of whatever field has impact on whatever. We really want to know that your project, the activities you will develop in the framework of your project will have an impact, will enable to reach these expected outcomes and impacts as stated in the work program. We also want you to mention the target groups that would benefit from your project. And something that we already said, but worth to tell again, the outcomes and impacts of your project may be of really different nature. They could be scientific. This is what is pretty obvious in most of the research project under Horizon Europe. Your project can contribute to specific scientific advances across and within disciplines. Your project can create new knowledge, reinforce scientific equipment, instruments, computing system, and so on and so forth. This is pretty classical for research projects. But the outcomes and impacts of your project may also be economic and technological, fostering all forms of innovation, facilitating technological development, knowledge transfer, strengthening the deployment of innovative solutions. And last but not least, your impact outcomes and impacts can be societal. They can generate new knowledge, strengthen the impact of research and innovation in developing or supporting new policies, in developing, supporting the uptake of innovative solutions in industry, in society, to address any kind of global challenges that are important for the society. So this is really what is required from you when we ask you to describe the pathway towards impact of your project. We can go to the next slide. Once you have we have done that, you will be guided by the proposal template. We really added in the proposal template a lot of small help text to explain you how to best address what we want you to address. You will be asked to describe any requirements and potential barriers that may determine whether the desired outcomes and impacts are achieved, and any kind of mitigation measures that you could propose. So those requirements and potential barriers that might make more difficult for your project to reach the outcomes and impacts are other research and innovation works in Horizon Europe or beyond it. Some the regulatory environment, some targeting market, user behaviors. So you really need to to think about what could be those barriers, and if you identify some of them, how you can address them, which kind of mitigation measures you can propose. And something that is new under Horizon Europe, but really important, is that we also ask you to describe any significant potential negative environmental outcome and impact, and explain if there is a significant harm to the environment, how it can be managed. And last but not least, under this subsection of the proposal template, we ask you to give a quantified indication of the scale and significance of the project contribution towards expected outcomes and impacts. When we talk about scale, we refer to how widespread the outcomes and impacts are likely to be. So this is something like a size of a target group, a proportion of a group, like really something quantified like that. And when we talk about significance, we refer to the importance of the values and of the benefits. For example, the number of additional healthy life that your project in the health field could give, or if you're in the field of energy, how much even efficiency savings your project will enable to reach. So yeah, we really ask you to give some kind of quantified indications, of course, to the best of your knowledge at the moment of writing your proposals. We can go to the next slide where we have an example, because all what I said is really nice, but I'm pretty sure it's remain a bit vague and a lot of new technical words. So let's have a look in practice on how this is working. And here we are in a fictive example in the part of the work program dealing with transport and mobility. And in this work program, so we open the section about transport and mobility, and at the destination level, at the chapter level, we have a list of impacts, and the impact in the work program is written. You can see it in the right part of the slide in the green box. The work program impact is written like that: seamless, smart, inclusive, and sustainable mobility services. So as you can see, this is something pretty wide, and it is also something more on the long-term perspective. Then at the level of the topic, we have a list of outcomes, and these outcomes is reading this way: innovative accessibility and logistics solution applied by the European transport sector. So here it is something you see a bit more specific, a bit more targeted, and that would happen more towards the medium term. So here we are, we have this expected outcomes and impacts, and we have to explain the concrete pathway towards impact of our project. And our project will deliver some results. And one of these results is a successful large-scale demonstration trial with 3 airports. And we will demonstrate a new advanced system for forecasting and proactive airport passenger flow management. So we delivered the demonstration trial of this new system, and 3 airports were involved in the demonstration. This is the result of our projects. This is what was implemented in the course of the project. How to explain the pathway towards the impact of our project? First, we need to address the contribution to the expected outcomes. And we can say that from this specific result, the demonstration trial with 3 airports, we expect that at least 9 European airports will adopt the forecasting system that we have demonstrating during the course of our project. So as you can see, this is something more towards the medium term. It could happen at the end of our project or immediately after. And to reach this, we will, of course, have some dissemination and exploitation measures. We will communicate about our project. We will contact the other airports that might be interested. We will explain them what we have done, our system is working, and it will enable us to have at least 9 European airports adopting it. This is the contribution to the expected outcome. And if we go one step further, the contribution to the expected impact, this is something that will happen even after. And as you can see in the slide, it could be, for example, an increased maximum passenger capacity by 15% and leading to a reduction of the infrastructure cost by 28%. And that would be what will happen if this system is more widely adopted by other airports. So this is an example on how to address a project pathway towards impact. Of course, it really depends on the nature and the objectives of your specific project. And we can go to the next slide, and I will give the floor back to you.
So thanks, Benedict. I think Niels will take it from here.
Yes, thank you very much, Kim, and thank you very much, Benedict, for this nice overview. I would like to ask you something about how to address impact. We see that Horizon Europe is an impact-driven program. It has a clear strategic plan, ambition. This plan is described in the strategic plan, which is a plan which tries to bridge the EU policies into the work programs and topics. But what does that really mean for applicants? To what extent should they know about all these EU policies? Should they know about the strategic plan when they write their proposal? And also when it comes to evaluators, are we expected that they are also going to read all these plans? Are they expected to read the strategic plan? That's my question. Thank you.
So I would say for applicants, the really reference document is the work program. When you apply to a topic under Horizon Europe, your reference is the work program. You are really invited to read carefully the text of the topic you're applying for, to read also the text of the destination, because it's where you are going to find the list of the expected impacts. But we don't require you to be a specialist of all EU policies and all EU policy documents and studies that could have been published in the last years. And for why I'm saying that, it's because, as you mentioned, we have this document that is called the strategic planning, and the Commission and the member states have worked together really a great deal of time on that document. And this document is making the synthesis of all the policy priorities of the Commission, all the key policy documents, strategies, and you can see on the slide different some of those strategies. Everything has been analyzed and gathered in this strategic planning, which is really the document that is enabling us to define what we want to focus on. And this has been used and reflected in the drafting of the work program. So when you look at the work program, everything and all the key policy priorities are already encompassed in the work program. So we don't request from you to become a specialist of EU policies and strategies. Of course, it can happen, and it's the case in some topics, that they make a direct link about one EU policy area, one policy document. And if your work program say, I don't know, address the objective of the EU biodiversity strategy for 2030, that's the one I see on the slide. If it's really stated and written like that in your topics, that would be clever of you to have a look at what it is. But unless there is a really specific reference, your reference should be the work program, and you should draft your proposals really using the information you have in the topic text.
Thank you very much, Benedict. And what about the evaluators? Are they expected to read all this stuff? Are they expected to read all the EU policy papers and the strategic plan?
I would say the same logic applies to the expert evaluators. Their key task is to focus on the evaluation of the proposals that are given to them to evaluate. Of course, they will be briefed by the Commission staff in charge of the evaluation of a specific topic. So they will be briefed about the topic in itself, and if it is required, and if the background of some knowledge of some EU strategy is essential for them to perform the evaluations, that will be part of their expert briefing. But we don't require from them neither that ahead of evaluating the proposals assigned to them, they spend a few days browsing the internet and reading about the EU main policy and strategic documents. The same logic apply.
Thank you very much, Benedict. And I will hand over to you again, Kim.
Yes, thank you. So I thought it was very, very useful to have this to have this clarification on this point, because I think for many applicants, it's all these. Once you start Googling the EU strategies in this and that field, you can quickly become confused, and it would be a daunting task to actually read through them all. So it's nice to know that the Commission has done that work and implemented in the work program. So it's just a question of addressing, well, just so that applicants can focus on addressing the topics as stated in the work program. Now, we are moving here to the second point, or the second discussion we would like to have on these new notions linked to impact. And here, during the next few minutes, we would like to think more about what these expected outcomes are. So the expected outcomes are a novelty under Horizon Europe. If you have had experience with a previous framework program, Horizon 2020, you will know that as an applicant, you would have to describe in your proposal how you would deliver on expected impacts, and they were defined at the topic level. Now, this is no longer the case. Now, expected impacts are at the chapter level, the destination level, and then you have these expected outcomes at the topic level. So what are they? What is this novelty? So if we start by looking how they are described in the proposal template, there are two places in which they are defined. It first says they are the results of your projects, and they contribute to the they say that the results of your project, should contribute to these expected impacts, outcomes, and that they are to be delivered over the medium term. And then further down in this template, the outcomes are defined as the results of a project should contribute to these outcomes. So the outcomes are post result, and the outcomes generally occur during or shortly after the end of the project. This is also what you said in your presentation, Benedict. So they are not results, these outcomes, they're not the results of the project, but something that happens once the results are in. They are enabled or made possible by the results over the medium term, as opposed to the impacts, which are long term. Now, the medium term is not a very specific time indication, and we'll come back to that. So it also says here shortly after the project. So this is again to do with the time indication. When should they be delivered? So when can you be expected to deliver on the expected outcome? I think that's an important question. And I think the answer to that is that it depends on the outcomes as defined under the topic that you're applying for, and it depends on your project. So if you look at the expected outcomes across the different work programs, or even within a specific work program, you will see that they're not always described or defined in an identical way. Some of them come closer to being project results, others imply wider systemic changes that one single project could not bring about on its own. So that's to the first point, outcome. It depends how you could deliver and when you could deliver an expected outcome. Depends on the actual expected outcome and how it is defined. And then, as I said, it also depends on your project, because it's clear that some project ideas or designs will allow applicants to deliver on certain outcomes faster than other project ideas. So there is not a definite answer to when you should deliver on the expected outcomes, but obviously since we're talking about a impact-driven program, Horizon Europe, you should aim to deliver on the expected outcomes and impact sooner rather than later. So I've made this illustration to help us understand what the expected outcomes are. I think my way of defining the expected outcomes, I'm saying, is usually I say that the expected outcomes are stepping stones. So they're medium-term stepping stones toward the expected impacts. And you know that stepping stone, this is something, stepping stone is usually something very concrete. It could be the stepping stones that take you through a stream. So it is not a conjecture, it's something very, very concrete that will help you move along. Now, why have I illustrated these expected outcomes as bus stops? Well, I have defined them here as, or I've illustrated them here as bus stops, because usually expected outcomes or delivering on the expected outcomes implies engaging with users, and that could be industries, policymakers, citizens, decision makers, etc. Stakeholders that will make use or could make use of your project results. And so it is important that your project results are acceptable and readily understood by these stakeholders so that they can make use of them. So addressing expected outcomes means finding ways in which you can engage and onboard the stakeholders that are necessary to realize the outcomes, hence the bus stops. Now, how could that be done? Well, that could be done by associating them to the project as partners sometimes, or have them in a sounding board or an advisory body linked to the project, or simply by having a planned and structured dialogue with the stakeholders during the project or with their representatives. We'll give you a few examples in a sec. So the outcomes are not project results. They are something that is enabled by the project's results. When can you deliver on them? Well, that depends on your project, and it depends on the expected outcomes. And it is important that you show that you will pave the way for them in order to convince the evaluators or in order to convince the evaluators, it's important that you try and break down these outcomes into concrete stepping stones for your individual projects. Well, now we'll move to an example or two, and I'll give the floor to Nils for the first example.
Thank you very much, Kim. And yes, as explained by both Benedict and by Kim, we are dealing with an impact-driven program, a program which is very much connected, linked to different EU policies. And here I have taken an example where you can see a topic which is clearly defined and in relation to one of the important EU policies that we are dealing with. That is the Farm to Fork strategy, which is a part of the Green Deal strategy. And here I'll say it's an example where I think you have to read the topic text carefully. Look into what is described. If I read some of the text here, you can see that a successful proposal should support the Farm to Fork strategy. It's also saying that it should also be in line with the report on the development of plant proteins in the EU. So here are examples where you have to be familiar with what's in these strategies and these reports. It's also stated that a successful proposal should contribute to all the expected outcomes which are listed, and here you see that it should be something which has which can identify a suitable regional and local transition pathway. It should be something which should have robust evidence of the social and economic, environmental, climate, and health benefits. It should improve capacities of farmers. It should also create stronger innovation systems. So I think a very carefully described topic, and here my ideas for questions that could be raised should be: how should you define your stakeholders? How can you convince evaluators that your project can build a stronger innovation ecosystem? And how can you also convince that evaluators that your project will increase commercial plant production of protein crops? And how can you also develop relevant indicators? So that's just an example, and I'll go on to you, Kim. You have also an example?
Yes, I have an example from the health program. So here is a topic where applicants are invited to validate a biomarker for mental health or illness. So the overall aim is to prevent mental health problems. So that speaks to most of us. So the first outcome here, I haven't listed all the outcomes, but here the first outcome: identify, validate, and document different types of biomarkers, etc., that confer susceptibility or protect against mental illness. This is something that researchers, this is something that speaks to researchers. This is their business. Usually they will have a good idea on how you could actually deliver on that outcome. This outcome would probably be something that you could deliver during the project's lifetime. And whereas the second outcome, and the second outcome here reads: citizens have the possibility, blah, 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 to undergo laboratory testing for assessing their mental health, and so that they can be given guidance on personalized preventive measures as to their mental health. This is something that implies a change to the way in which healthcare is dispensed currently. It implies a shift from treating to preventing. This is, of course, the overall aim. And it also says citizens, which is all of us, basically. So how can you bring about such a change? This raises a number of questions. Who will pay for it? It is clear that researchers will have a hard time making sure that lab testing is available for the general public. So the questions raised by this topic, I think there are a number of questions. First, let me point to the fact that these expected outcomes are distributed in time. So for the question, when can you deliver on an expected outcome? It is clear that there are differences between these outcomes under this topic. The first one, validate different types. This could be done within or just very shortly after the project. This comes close to being a project result in a way. Whereas the second one will take much more, could take longer to implement. So how can you deal with that second outcome? Well, one important way of doing it would be to sort of break down this outcome into something that you can handle and which would be concrete for your project. So we're looking for these concrete stepping stones. So you need to redefine this outcome and break it into something, break it into a piece that you can handle. So you cannot handle all citizens. So you will need to find some proxy for citizens. That would be my take on it. So you would need to identify a group of citizens. That could be, for instance, people who work night shifts and are prone to mental health problems. And you would need to engage with them or their representative bodies. That could be their unions, or could also be their employers or insurers, to discuss what it would take for this group to have access the value of also for this group to have access to this to this type of testing, so that it and think about, you know, what it would take for them to have this, to make this lab testing available to them. Who should pay for it? Under what circumstances should be? So this would be a very concrete way of showing that you are making lab testing available to a group of citizens, and that by making it available to, say, a vulnerable or a group of citizens who are maybe prone to a mental illness because of their work situation, the workload, etc., then you're paving the way for this to become mainstream or used in other citizens groups. So this would be a concrete way of addressing this outcome and breaking it down into something that you can handle, and where you would be able to have a structured debate or invite people representing this specific citizen group into your project, link them to your project, so that you could so that you can convince evaluators that you're actually taking a concrete step towards delivering this outcome. So this was my second example, and now I'll hand the floor to Christian. And Christian, I think you will run through some of the things that Benedict also addressed in her presentation. So just briefly, what are you aiming to do here, Christian?
Yeah, I'm looking at the chronological order of 2.1 pathways to impact, and as you said, I will dive maybe a little bit deeper into some of the points that you said. I think we have covered what we could call the objectives, the outcomes, and the impacts, but we also want to dive a little bit further into some more of the concepts, and those are under A, target groups that would benefit, the requirements, the potential barriers, and also the scale and significance of contribution. Next slide, please.
Mm-hmm.
What does the target group say about what does the template say about target groups? Be specific and break target groups into particular interest groups or segments of society. And target groups in itself is a somewhat passive term, but the template also goes further and talks about interest groups and thereby also stakeholders. And we could maybe stretch it even further, as you have also mentioned, Kim, and talk about the users, someone with a very active approach to your work, of course. Even though we move quite close in some topics to application to launch in Horizon Europe, we are still research and innovation program that stops short of launch. So you will practically always have results that need to be taken a lot further, at least somewhat further, maybe a lot further post-project to actually deliver on impacts, of course. And that's where the users come in. Who is it, as I sometimes say, who is it that is up at night thinking about your field, your results? These are the ones you want to get engaged, so it's out, you have to find them out there. Next slide, please. We should, of course, distinguish between users, people that will take your results further. We could call them lead users, but the ones that use or buy the results later, we could call end users. Lead users are not, of course, restricted to industry. It could also be NGOs, governments, interest organizations, or hospitals, depending on the project. And there's a distinct focus in Pillar 2 that the pathways to impact do not stop when the project stops. So a point to mention is also that you need to show some measure of post-project commitment, you could call it, maybe an estimation even of partner lead user person months after the fact. What are the logical steps to take and how much are you committed to that? Next slide, please. talking about target groups, users, specificity is crucial, and there are several angles you can look at it from. Your agenda, so to speak, are dissemination, exploitation, and communication. So be specific here. So what are the groups to do in regard to these different angles of your agenda? You could also break them up into other lines, but bottom line is you need to differentiate, and when your differentiation becomes better and more granulated, then you should also include more varied types of activities, instruments, channels to engage the different target groups. My point here is that there's a very, very big difference in disseminating to your peers, or for instance, disseminating to caretaking relatives of fragile elderly people testing your new prototype of technology. So different target groups, different tactics. The slide, please. The requirements and barriers in B. This short section is where you reveal your dependencies and the barriers that relate to your project, but are outside your project. We're not talking about the what the template calls management risks. So you have to make a kind of a qualified brainstorm around the political, economic, regulatory, social, cultural, technological, legal, environmental, and ethical things that relate the 9 dimensions of problems that could be relevant for this, and make a qualified brainstorm where you cross out what is relevant and what is not relevant. Next slide, please. I put in a few examples coming from EU projects, of course. And the first one, if it is a project built around co-creation, then capturing people's interest, keeping them engaged, especially if it's over prolonged periods of time, and intense engagement, that could be a barrier, of course. The next one, legacy, the systems infrastructure that are already in place. For instance, a smart city project that wants to, as a part of its project, to replace something as mundane as a traditional lamppost. Then they need to know that a traditional lamppost actually has a lifespan of 75 years, which means that a traditional standard lamppost installed as new in 1985 is only to be replaced in 2060. So things already in place also. Threat from competitors is also something you need to be very clear about. If an evaluator knows this and you do not tell it, then you are most likely gone. So be honest about this, but send also the clear signal maybe that this threat is only relevant if they do not give you the money, or phrase it otherwise, like if innovation speed is not accelerated, they will get the picture. Sometimes barriers can be more long-standing and structural in nature, and the fossil fuel subsidies I have example could fall into that category, where green technologies have to account for distorted markets because of political considerations. This is not maybe something you can do much about as your own project, but you could maybe try to set a task to raise awareness of the problem. And the last one is, of course, might be quite common if you engage with a conservative sector or of industry or society. Then a good way to mitigate is to find the early innovators, so to speak, in that sector, and interact with them on what is the unique selling points of your results, and get them maybe even to be kind of gatekeepers, ambassadors to your outcome. Next slide, please. So the key message to this short section is we know the problems already, and then you should try to close the section with as specific and concrete responses that you can, as you can. Those would most likely entail what are the plans for engagement, interaction with what I call the users or the barriers of barriers, plus also highlighting your experience, maybe the specific experience with the barrier or the specific experience with the field. And also, if we have a kind of momentum right now, is there a momentum for change in this, a conducive environment, like heightened consumer awareness, or other things? Europe has seen a lot of big and small crises over the last few years, and crises are also opportunities for change, to change structures. Next slide, please. The scale and the significance of the project's contribution to the expected outcomes and impacts, and provide quantified estimates where possible and meaningful. So scale could be translated from bureaucrat lingo to how many, and significance to how much, I would say. But one of the big questions are, of course, quantification. When is it not possible, and when is it not meaningful? Benedict also touched upon this, but this is not her decision, it is not our decision, it is the evaluator's decision. When is it not possible? You should, so our recommendation is to push yourself, and when we look across Pillar 2, there are really not many topics where it is not possible, meaningful, at least in some respects. And even if numbers are scarce and hard to come by, you could make a kind of a consortium, a workshop, where you put together some of the numbers, and then you can present those figures, of course, with your reservations, and say that you have tried to actually have a quantified estimate, so you can build an indicative key performance indicator. Next slide, please. This headline is, of course, provocatively put there, but it is true in very, very many topics. That is, the bottom line is that evaluators need to know the level of your project's outreach, your targets, your KPIs. So first step is to have the baseline, and then an estimation of how many, how much, of course. Next slide, please. So the recommendation from us is clearly do it as much, take it as far as you can, but use a common methodology across partners, show the steps in your extrapolations, show your sources and your references, of course, and argue these sources' credibility, and keep your estimations conservative so as not to inflate figures and lose that credibility. That credibility is key here. We are talking about credible pathways to impact. That was a bit about some of the concept, some more about the concept in 2.1. Thank you. Kim, are you taking it further?
Thank you. I don't know what happened. Now you can see me again. Yes, I'm sorry. I was talking to no one, to myself. I'm sorry. Yes, so thank you, Christian. And now we have a few seconds or a few minutes to just reflect on what we've talked about, which is this first section of the impact section, pathways towards your project pathways towards impact. Benedict, if I was to ask you just one question, you know, what is the main take-home message that you would like to convey to our listeners?
I would say when you describe your project pathway towards impact, you need to be ambitious, you need to be creative, but you need also to be concrete. And it's really linked to what Christian said on his last slide. Like, don't create things just to look impressive, because that will be not convincing. Be ambitious, be creative, but be concrete and specific to your specific projects. That would be, I think, the main message regarding the impact section.
Right. I think for those of our listeners who have had experience with Horizon 2020, um, often when addressing impact, this is what we've heard from applicants, that they felt that they had to make educated guesses on how they would deliver an impact. That sometimes they felt it was just conjectures. And if my take on the novelty here, also the introduction of expected outcomes, is that somehow you're also offering some help to applicants by breaking down the expected impacts, or by introducing this intermediary step, which are the expected outcomes. So I think a critical way of talking about these expected outcomes is that control is better than trust, right? Control is better than trust. You need to deliver on these impacts, but we're also telling you how you should deliver on these impacts more specifically. We're telling you need to deliver on these outcomes before you can, or on your pathway towards the impacts. Any thought about that? Any thoughts on that? Are you trying to control the applicants, Benedict?
I would not say we try to control, but we try to help them to get to something more targeted, because this is the experience we have from Horizon 2020. What we heard both from applicants and from experts, that it was really difficult to write something under the impact section, that it was, just what you said, like making conjectures about the future, not really precise. And that for the evaluators, it was also really difficult to evaluate when all proposals made super nice promises, but without being really sure that this would be reached in any kind of way. So what we try to do under Horizon Europe is to put more guidance, more steps, and more support for applicants to really build their pathway towards the impact, and the same for experts, that they will be also more supported in evaluating that.
Benedict, can I ask a short question on the order of 2.1, the A, the B, the C, because maybe you would want to switch it up. Do the proposals have kind of an artistic liberty in this?
Christian, is there a slide I should go back to illustrate this?
Yeah, the chronologically ordered.
Okay, so I'll try and find it here.
Yeah, but it's
Is it the first one?
Yeah, it's the first one. Yeah, we have the A, the B, the C, and normally here in Eurocenter we are quite religious about following the order of the template, so to speak. But since we have the commission here and it is your template, I want to ask your take about whether to rearrange maybe, because I find it just tired illogic to here in A. Then you describe your project's result will make towards the outcome specified in this topic and the wider impacts. And then under C, you give an indication, quantified indication of that same expected outcome and impact. And in between, we find the requirements and potential barriers. So I would maybe, in some sense, write A, C, and then B. Could you comment on that?
Yeah, so we have the template. The template is a skeleton, and of course, it's better if you respect the order, like 1 excellence, 2 impact, and 3 implementation, that you respect also the sub bullets that are matching with the aspects to be taken into account, which are the sub evaluation criterion. But once you are writing your narrative part, this is a narrative, so just write it the best way it is for your project and the most convincing way it is, and don't feel too constrained by the structure and the help text. Like, it's your proposal, it's your choice to write it the way is more logical and more smooth and natural for the development of the argumentation. What
So
is
in this
important
smaller,
is that experts just find what they're wanting to find in there.
Mhm. So in the smaller parts, then you focus on the narrative to convince the evaluators that you have the logical flow in this. All right.
Completely. Anyway, when you will be writing your proposal, like all those help text, you don't keep them in your template. Like, you just remove the help
Mhm.
text. They are help text to help you. They are not supposed to remain in your proposal. So then you will have your narrative part, and you organize that the way you want. That's your liberty of of
Good
creating the
one.
proposal the way you think is the best. What is important is that we keep the titles of the parts and the subparts. This will help evaluators, and if you start to mix everything, they will be confused, and that will probably not be the best idea for your proposal. But inside
They
the
are
sub
only human.
paragraph, that's
Mm.
you're free to do the best way it is for your proposal.
Mhm.
Should we move on?
Yes, I think so. So just to sum this up, don't be worried. Don't worry too much about the policies, the EU policies you don't know. The strategic goals set as the white papers, the publications, etc. All this is part of a machinery, and the machinery of the Commission has made sure that the work programs reflect those strategies. So you should just concentrate on the info that is in the work program and in your topic, and dive into the papers that are mentioned there if necessary. And then the other thing is, the expected outcomes are your friend or your friends, right? They're meant to help you and make sure that you stay as concrete as possible and try and deliver concrete results on your way, on the pathway, or on the way to the expected impact. So now, yes, I think we're ready to move on to the next section, which deals with the measures to maximize impact. And here we are. So this is where the applicants must explain and describe the dissemination and communication and exploitation measures they're planning in order to maximize the impact of their project, the impact that they have just described under section 2.1. And applicants must also here deliver a first version of their plan for dissemination, exploitation, and communication, identify relevant target groups, and outline their strategy for the management of intellectual property. So, sorry, Benedict, we're ready for your second presentation. So here we go, the floor is yours.
So now let's go to those measures to maximize impact. This is the second aspect to be taken into account under the impact criteria under Horizon Europe. So we can go to the next slide. And we already mentioned many times those measures because we already talked about dissemination, exploitation, and communication, for the really simple reason that if you want your project results to deliver toward the expected outcomes and impacts, you need to do something about it. You need to disseminate, exploit, and communicate your results. And this is why for each proposal submitted under Horizon Europe, it will be required to include a draft plan for the dissemination, exploitation, and communication activities. This is an admissibility condition. So in most and the wide majority of Horizon Europe topics, you need to have this draft plan included in your proposal if you want your proposal to be admissible. It could be in some exceptional cases not required, and in that case it will be explicitly written in the work program topic. But keep in mind that this is a mandatory admissibility requirement. Still, don't be worried about this plan for dissemination, exploitation, and communication. We know that we are at proposal stage and we don't ask you a full, complete, long plan for dissemination, exploitation, and communication. We require you to provide in your proposals more or less 1 page about dissemination, exploitation, and communication measures. And what is really important to keep in mind is that all those measures should be proportionate to the scale of your project and should contain concrete actions that will be implemented both during and after the end of your project. So here it's something we already said many times today in this presentation. What is really important is for you to have measures proportionate to your project and concrete, really addressing what you will do with your project results to disseminate, exploit, and communicate them concretely. We don't want like wide measures that are barely related to your activities. It needs to be targeted. So what would be the elements of this dissemination, exploitation, and communication plan? Well, of course, it will be the plan measures to maximize the impact of your project. And they can be, it's hard to give examples, but because they can be really diverse depending on the nature of your activities. It will really depend what are you developing under your project. What we also want to hear about is these target groups or users or stakeholders you want to reach. Those target groups that could be really different, and here again it will have an impact on the plan measures you will develop, because of course you don't address the same way the scientific community that you could address through publications or conferences, scientific conferences. But of course, you will address differently your potential end users or financial actors or the general public, the citizens, or eventually the politicians, if you want your project results to be transformed into new policies. So that will really depend on your target groups. So we want to hear about who you plan to reach and how you want to reach them. What are the channels you want to use to interact with them? We are also interested in the communication measures you will put in place for promoting your project and its fighting during the life of your project. And I already talked about the policy measures, but if it is relevant for your project, any kind of policy feedback measures that could contribute to policy shaping and supporting the implementation of new policy are also something that you should mention in your dissemination, exploitation, and communication plan. And of course, we want to hear about the follow-up plan to foster the exploitation of the results. And here you will have to add elements about your strategy for managing the intellectual property. We'll come back to that in a moment. And something a bit more specific, but still to be addressed if it is the case for your project. If the exploitation of your project results will take place primarily in third countries that are not associated to Horizon Europe, you would need to explain and give a justification of why this is still in the European Union's interests. But all those elements, you will find them in the proposal template, and there are guidance and help texts there to help you through drafting this plan. So we can go to the next slide, which is a slide about definitions. Because I talked about communication, about dissemination, and about exploitation, but what does that mean exactly? So the communication is all the measures that will enable to promote your project in itself and its results, not only for the project owns community, but beyond and throughout the full lifespan of the project. So that could be communicating your research and its benefits for the society in a way that is understood by non-specialists. So it could be communication measures targeted to the general public, the media, some, I don't know, kids in school, or like any kind of measures of communications that are targeting non-specialist audience. When we talk about dissemination, here we talk about the measures that will enable to describe your project results and to make them visible. And these are not targeting the general public, but they are more targeted toward the audiences that may use your results. So you could target your peers, the scientific community, or the project's own community. You can target the industry if your project could have some industrial link with the industry, some commercial actors, the policymakers you already mentioned. So all those measures to describe and make your project result visible are dissemination measures. They will enable the use and uptake of your results. And then the next step is exploitation. When we talk about exploitation, we talk about the actual use of your project results for scientific, societal, economical purposes or for policy making. So the exploitation measures are targeting all the results that were generating during the project lifetime, but also what happened after the end of the project. And we can go to the next slide, which is about this last part of the dissemination and exploitation communication plan, which is the management of intellectual property. So under Horizon Europe, all beneficiaries should do its best to exploit the results on its own, or to have them exploited by another organization, another legal entity. That could be through the transfer or the licensing of results. But in this respect, beneficiaries are required to adequately protect their results if it is needed, and take into account all these possible prospects for commercial exploitation that could be happening. So for that reason, it's really important, and already at the proposal stage, to think about how you will manage the intellectual property. This is important because you will have to reflect it in your consortium agreement if your proposal is selected. And it is also important because if your project is selected, at the end of the project, you will have to provide a result ownership list as a compulsory deliverable. So to facilitate your life at the moment of preparing your consortium agreement and at the moment of preparing this results ownership list, it's really good to think already at the moment of drafting your proposal about your strategy for managing the intellectual property. And this strategy, you have here a list of bullet points. This strategy should be comprehensive, should be feasible, and it should include the relevant protection measures. Could be patenting, could be copyright, like all the kind of a measure for the protection of intellectual property. Of course, it should be commensurate with what you described in the section about the project pathway to outcomes and impacts. You should consider the freedom to operate regarding the background owned by the consortium members or outside third parties, if relevant here again. And you should reflect upon the balance between the publication of results and the plan to protect the intellectual property. And of course, and this is something we said again, you need to refer to the topics condition in the work program if any kind of other additional obligations regarding exploitation and intellectual property are mentioned there. That could happen. So here again, your reference is the topic text in the work program, and be sure that you address what is written in there. So I think we can go to the next slide, which is the Q&A.
Yes, thank you very much, Benedicte. It's a pleasure to have you here again. It was very interesting. What are the points that come up is of course, or the proposers, they look to your guides for communication and dissemination and see creative new ideas there. But the in the last they actually, if I may be honest, they are quite old now, and they have not really the commission guides, and they have not maybe taken as much into account this the whole growth of social media now. So would you consider that, and maybe are you planning on making new that takes social media much more into account?
So regarding dissemination, communication, exploitation, we will have some elements about it on the Horizon Europe program guide that will be soon published on the Funding and Tenders portal. That will be a guide addressing a number of policy requirements under Horizon Europe, and dissemination, exploitation, communication are in there. And well, I haven't seen the final version of it, but I expect that it should address also the more modern and more like the new ways we are communicating about projects those days. And it's true what you say, like in the past, typical communication measure was to have a website, project website. Every single project was having a project website. That was like some money, some time was involved in there. We are not so sure that it was always really reaching having tremendous effect regarding communication, because who's visiting a website about the project except maybe the project partners from time to time. So yeah, we completely agree with you that might be not the best and the most efficient way of communicating about your project, and that you would be probably way more efficient, I don't know, sharing some elements on the social networks, whether they are professional ones like LinkedIn, or if you targeted more the general public on another one, or you could make, I don't know, a video on YouTube, and that would be reach way bigger audience than your traditional old project website. So indeed, using the social networks is definitely part of your plans, and yeah, that's up to you to provide in your proposal this kind of communication measures that would be indeed, I think I'm not evaluating the project myself, but would be evaluated positively by the experts.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much, Benedikte. Kim, do you have anything to add, or will you take it further?
Yes, I will. Maybe just one question, which is on the results of your project at the end of your project, and even after the project. I understand the Commission is aiming to track the use and the value, if you will, of projects, even post project. So what does that mean for applicants? Are they expected to also continue tracking the exploitation of their project results after the project is concluded? Could you give us maybe?
So that's indeed a novelty of Horizon Europe. We are interested in what will happen also after the end of the project, because we have the experience that the day the project ends, we lose the track. So what will happen is that when the project is selected and the consortium is signing the grant agreement, there are provisions about the dissemination and exploitation of results, and there is the obligation of exploiting the results, which means that if no exploitation has taken place during and after the end of the project, after 1 year after the end of the project, the consortium members will be required to at least put their results into the Horizon Result platform, which is this platform that is now existing since a while, but that is developing day after day, and which is a platform where we can, when you can publish the results of your project, and interested stakeholders could browse and look at them. So that will be a requirement for consortiums, at least to put their results in the Horizon results platform. And then the Commission is also planning after the end of the project to follow up lightly, of course, not to ask crazy requirements from former beneficiaries of the project, but that could be sending a questionnaire to have a bit more visibility about what happened, about the dissemination and exploitation of the results.
Mm-hmm. So
but yeah.
This is all to try and, well, to be able to follow the investments made with public money, and finding out if we're actually reaching the goals, that we are having the impact that we are aiming to have.
And that leads us back to what I already said at the beginning of the webinar, that Horizon Europe is an impact-driven program. We want to follow more carefully and to help the project to define their own impact, and we want to monitor the impact of the program as a whole. And for that, we also need to monitor better and to know better what happens thanks to the money we have invested in the project. What are the impacts of these investments?
And where can applicants find this platform that you were talking about?
So you can find it on the Funding and Tenders portal, which is your key to European funding programs. And there is probably a tab about the Horizon Results platform. But if you also type it in Google or other browser you use, you should also reach directly the platform.
Now, if you publish your results there, I mean, probably some of our listeners will think about, you know, how you can publish results and at the same time protect them. So, is there any? Do you jeopardize your by publishing your results on this platform? Are you jeopardizing also maybe your possibility to exploit and make use of your project results without exposing yourself to competition?
Well, that's all the issue of the balance between exploiting your results and keeping the needed intellectual property rights over your results. So that's about that's exactly what is required from you when you draft your strategy for the management of the intellectual property. And it's hard to answer, like, generally speaking, because that would be really depending on what are your project, what are the results, what are you planning to do to exploit them yourself, or if some other members of the consortium will be exploiting, or the stakeholders that you have already identified or not. That really depends on what you plan to do, I would say.
Right, because sometimes patents or copyright is not the way forward. Sometimes it's just keeping it secret and trying to move fast and make use of them and just be the first mover, right? So this is just to I think my point is that, you know, patents are not a requirement.
No, they are not a requirement. And if you want to exploit your results yourself, you can definitely exploit them, and then you will also have you would have complied with your obligation to exploit the results because you would have done it yourself. So
exactly.
that's also compliant to what is required from you.
Let's just briefly here to finish off this webinar on the impact section, discuss this third part, which is the summary, the impact canvas, also called. So what is the objective of this canvas that you have to provide, or these tables that you have to sort of fill in and that you also find in the template? What is the objective? Who is this for?
So this is indeed a new section, a novelty of the Horizon Europe proposal templates, and this is a summary section of everything that we have described in the part 2, the part about impact. And this canvas has really an objective to be a visual presentation of what you have written in this narrative part. We have tried to put in there all the elements. We have mentioned the expected results, what are your dissemination, exploitation, communication measures going to be, the impact, the outcomes, the target groups, like everything is gathered in there. And the objective is both for you as applicants and both for experts to make it easier to draft and to evaluate the impact section. So for you as applicants, I would say there is two ways to approach it. Either you start writing the narrative of your pathway to impact and measures for maximizing the impacts, and then you proofread and you check if it is really working, filling this table. So you put different elements and you check if everything is there, if nothing is missing. And if you see that there is one of these boxes that remains empty, probably you forgot to address something. So you should go back and try to see what is missing. Another way that I could imagine is that you start from here And if you have an idea already of what are your dissemination and exploitation measure, what are your expected results, what are the target groups, you can try to start filling this table with more synthetic information, more on the style of bullet points. And then from there, you can develop what you think, expand a bit, and prepare the narrative part. So I would say
So it
that
could be a working document also, maybe.
that can be a working document, and then, well, maybe you've produced your narrative and then you go back to it and you polish it maybe before finalizing your proposal. That's the two way I see. Of course, I haven't drafted myself an Horizon Europe proposal, so I don't.
It hasn't been tried yet.
I haven't tried it, and it hasn't been tried yet. So that would be for you to explore what is working the best for you. And for the experts, it's also something important because, as I told already, we
So
had
the
a lot
experts,
of
meaning the evaluators.
the evaluators, the one that will be evaluating your proposals. That could be also a way for them to have access to the information of your proposal in a synthetic way, and to facilitate their work in evaluating the proposals. So yeah, that was really the two objectives of this canvas.
Great, thank you very much, Benedict. I think we can move on to this. I think this is your final slide.
This is my final slide. I talked a lot, as you have seen, about the expert evaluators, the independent expert that the Commission is hiring for either evaluating the submitted proposals or reviewing them when they are ongoing projects. And we have launched a call for interest for experts that is open all the time. There is no deadline for that. So we are looking for new experts to register in our database. And why am I mentioning it right now? It's also because that could be a good way to learn how to write a successful proposal, to be participating in evaluating some. Because you would see what is working, what is not working, what is convincing, what is missing in proposals, what is perfectly well addressed. And that could give you really an hands-on experience on proposal writing and evaluating under Horizon Europe. So if you're interested, don't hesitate to register. You will find the link on the slides, but there is also, if you want to access it by yourself, you go again to the Funding and Tenders portal, and there is a tab, Work as an Expert. And here you will find all the information about the requirements and how to register in the database.
Who can be an expert?
Well, everyone that has expertise can become an expert.
Okay.
There is no requirements like having a PhD completed or something like that. But you need, of course, to have expertise in the fields that are of interest for the European Commission. What is important to know is that while registering in the database, you don't only register for Horizon Europe, but for all the funding programs of the Commission. And you can, when you register yourself, choose what are your fields of expertise and interest. So you could be contacted, I don't know, if you are specialized in environmental issues, you could be contacted to participate in an evaluation under Horizon Europe, because we have, of course, research projects targeting the environment. But you could be also contacted for the LIFE program or any kind of other programs.
Okay.
And of course, we are looking for all kinds of profiles of experts, but we are also particularly interested in new people that haven't participated yet to register. And we are interested in people coming from the industry, the SMEs, also to registering, because we have a lot of topics that are targeting also more industrial type project or project by SMEs. And we like to have the expertise of people from those type of organization to be able
and then
to
you also have
participate.
certain internal requirements, as I understand it, where you try to have balanced evaluative
Indeed. So
panels.
for Horizon Europe, we have a target of 50-50 gender balance in the evaluation panels. So we know that in some fields we have more male experts registered, and we are particularly looking for female profile. And might also happen that in other fields the balance is in the other other directions.
Mm.
So yeah, the
Right.
more expert we have in the database, the easiest it is for us to find experts with the good level of expertise, and yeah, that will enable us to also match with these requirements.
Great. So thank you very much for this point as well. Benedict, I'll just finish off by mentioning two, before we say goodbye, mentioning two schemes. Now, of course, you can always contact us here at Eurocenter. So, and I'd like to just mention two schemes. The first one is the EU Upstart Schemes that allows applicants, Danish applicants, to apply for a sum of money to cover the expenses involved in preparatory activities of writing an application under Horizon Europe. So you get more money if you're planning to be a coordinator for a proposal. And we still the next cutoff, the next deadline for applying is on the 8th of June, which is next week, I believe. So this is very soon. And then the other scheme I would like to mention is our pre-evaluation scheme. And this is to help and support coordinators of collaborative projects, so coordinators of applicant consortia. And it allows coordinators to identify two evaluators who will read their draft proposal and give them hopefully valuable feedback in order for the coordinator to improve the application before it is sent before it is submitted to the Commission. So these were just two schemes that I wanted to present to you, and I think that's the end of this webinar. So Benedict, thanks again for participating twice in this webinar on impact. And I really hope that this webinar will have impact on the quality of the applications that will be sent in, that it will be useful. So thank you very much for participating. I hope it was interesting even for you. Now is when you can turn on your mic and say yes.
Yes, it is always. Well, of course, we haven't gathered question and answers from the audience in this remake of the webinar, but we had a lot of questions and interactions with the audience the first time, and it's always enriching and helping us to improve the guidance, the updates, the frequently asked questions, and all the documents we try to provide for applicants to write successfully their proposals.
Great. Well, again, thanks, Benedict, from all of us, and until we meet next time. Goodbye, and thanks to all you out there who are watching. Good luck with your proposals. Ciao.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.